Hi, I'm Keith McLaughlin. I'm the Executive Director for the Colorado Water Resources and Power Development Authority. How many of you have heard of the state revolving funds or have used the state revolving funds? All right, a handful of folks. I'm primarily going to be talking about those programs and the grants under those programs. We're primarily a loan program, but we have a really sufficient amount of grants these days, as I'll touch on. So those are all the different grants I'm going to touch on here under the SRF programs. First one I'm going to talk about is the Drinking Water Revolving Fund. There's two SRF programs, one for water projects, one for wastewater projects. There's 5 primary drinking water grant sources that I'm going to be talking about. And please interrupt me if there are any questions as we're going along. Happy to answer any questions here, so you don't have to wait until the end. The first ones we're going to talk about are planning grants and design and engineering grants. And you'll see the term principal forgiveness or PF up there. Essentially what that is we issue a loan and that loan is forgiven immediately upon execution. That's principal forgiveness. So in all intents and purposes, it kind of looks and smells like a grant. The reason why we don't call it a grant is because if we call it a grant, then EPA puts additional requirements on those funds. And so principal forgiveness is the term. But just know that when you hear me say it, that also means grants. These planning grants and design and engineering grants are really set up for disadvantaged communities. Disadvantaged communities in the state are essentially almost any community that's outside the Front Range is going to qualify as a disadvantaged community. So any of those sort of rural areas really outside the Front Range, with the exception of some resorts, should qualify for planning grants and design and engineering grants. We have 10,000 available a year per community. It's available funding is 85,000, but it's 10,000 per community available. The planning grants are done preliminary needs assessment, environmental assessment, some of that upfront work that can often be the issue with communities, especially small disadvantaged communities coming in through the programs and getting dollars. We also have design and engineering, principal forgiveness loans, again, act and sort of smell like grants there. Available is $1.4 million. The max on those grants are $150,000. And that's really set up to do that upfront design work. It can also be used for feasibility studies for those eligible disadvantaged communities. Kind of moving on to our next grant, and you guys have already heard a lot about the IIJA or bill funds. Same thing. So if you hear me talking about one, Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, that's IIJA, but that's the same thing as bipartisan infrastructure law, just by a different name. There are sort of 2 pots under the drinking water program I'm going to focus in on. And the IIJA, in terms of the SRF dollars that the nation received, and then each state gets an allocation. Colorado received about $568 million under IIJA just for water and sewer projects. So it's the largest grant dollars we've ever seen under the history of the program by far, and we're in the last year of it. So it's still a great time to come in. We still have funds available. You can see the amounts up on there. But I'd certainly encourage you, if you have a water or wastewater project, it is a great time to come in through the programs. The first pot there is the IIJA supplemental funds. These are essentially more base program funds, and it's split between principal forgiveness and loan. So when you come into the program, you're going to receive about half the project in grant dollars and half the project in low interest loan dollars. Now, the low interest loan dollars are subsidized. And so you get anywhere from a 20 to 50% break on the loan side. So while you're getting half your money in grant, half your money in loan, I would argue that the subsidized interest rate really acts as another grant, right? So if you have say a $10 million debt service schedule, we're going to ask you to pay $8 million of it back. Essentially, that's like a $2 million loan, in addition to the actual grant dollars, which is about half. In terms of eligibility under IIJA, almost all communities that come in are going to be eligible for IIJA. It's a broad sort of group. There's a lot of funds available. There's a criteria that you have to meet. It's 3 of sort of 9 points. You hit the 3 points and you're in the program. I think we're seeing about 1 out of 10 communities aren't eligible. So 9 out of 10, 90% of the communities or a little under that are eligible for the IIJA funding. And then the lead service line pot. Lead service line pot, you can see a total of 65 million available, 44 million about under the supplemental. The lead service line doesn't have any other criteria besides you're a governmental entity, you've got a public water system, and you got lead lines. That's it. You qualify. So If you got a lead service line project, again, great time to come in. Half the money grant, half the money low interest loan program or subsidized loan program. So definitely take advantage of that. Let's see, moving over on to the, staying with the drinking water side, emerging contaminants. So you can see you've got $30 million available out of the 40 million. We've got multiple grants that have kind of stacked up on each other. Everybody understand or know, have heard the term PFAS. It's been around for a long time, particularly those, kind of raise your hand if you have heard of the PFAS. Most people, especially in this area of the state in particular. So PFAS is that forever chemical. It's that firefighting foam, but it's also in clothing and makeup and kids' toys, and it never goes away. That's why they call it the forever chemicals. And it's emerging contaminant. In fact, it is regulated now, but under the new administration, they're changing the regs on it to encourage folks to come in to address this issue like PFAS. And that's primarily what it's geared towards, but there are 11 emerging contaminants that are eligible under EPA because that's where the funding comes through to pass through to us. But PFAS is really what it's geared towards. And we've only had a couple of PFAS projects come through. The PFAS amount is 100% grant funds. So there's a cap at $18 million per project, but it's 100% grant. So if you've got a component of your project to address PFAS, or the entire project PFAS, that's 100% grant funds. Please come see me. Certainly want to get those funds out the door. And it's available through at least the end of this year and probably into 2027 based on just having difficulty of getting those projects in the door, in part because you're not required to do it at this point. So the incentive is we'll give you 100% grant. All right, I'm going to switch over to the Water Pollution Control Revolving Fund. That's the wastewater side. Kind of an interesting fact on the IIJA, when Trump came in, it was amended. And anybody have any Trump coins? You've ever heard of the Trump meme coins? It's cryptocurrency, right? So under the IIJA now, you can use that crypto Trump coins to pay your federal loans. No, that's not true at all. I just wanted to see if you guys were paying attention. It's kind of an interesting concept, but no, I literally made that up. I just wanted to see. On the wastewater side, the eligibility is even broader than the drinking water side. Drinking water, almost any project coming in with the exceptions of water rights, reservoirs, and dams are eligible. Although water rights can be used in certain cases for treatment, dams and reservoirs also can be used for certain cases like rehab. On the wastewater side, if you can get it approved by the health department, we can fund it. Real broad eligibility on the wastewater side. So think, there's traditional treatment, pipes, collection, pumps, all that kind of stuff eligible on the wastewater side. Let's get into those grants. It is a smaller portion of the funds that we're receiving, particularly under IIJA. In terms of planning grants, design and engineering grants, they really do mirror. The amounts in terms of availability are a little higher on the wastewater side for whatever reason. And there are a few. We're seeing more demand right now on the drinking water side, which means more availability on the wastewater side generally. So we've got more funds both in terms of planning grants, design and engineering grants, again, principal forgiveness loans. Also for disadvantaged communities. So it's essentially the same criteria and the same amounts, 10,000 on the planning grants and 150,000 max on the drinking water projects or drinking water design and engineering grants. All right, in terms of the IIJA funds, again, these are sort of supplemental IIJA funds under the program. We have about $50 million available. Again, it looks like it does on the drinking water side. It's about 50% grant, 50% of that subsidized loan, total about $50 million. All right. And there's an additional pot of emerging contaminant dollars on the wastewater side that we don't have listed there. It's just a very small amount. But if anybody has wastewater, are looking at particularly PFAS on the wastewater side, those of you who are in the water industry are certainly probably seeing it and testing for it on the water side, but it's going to hit the wastewater side because everything comes down, will discharge and it'll hit the wastewater at some point as well. So we've got a little bit of grant money there too. I want to leave my information, that's me at the top, our finance director's information, both email and phone numbers. Couple things I want to leave you with. One is you have to be on our eligibility list that gets approved by the legislature every single year. Survey goes out to every public water system in the state. And so you should have received the survey, but if your town, city, municipality is not on the list, make sure you get on the list because you have to be on the list to get eligible for any of those grant dollars I went through. If you're not on the list, we can get you added to the list. You reach out to me and we'll do that. The other thing I'd mention is because the water space is such a small group of folks, we know the other programs out there where it's Department of Local Affairs, CWCB, USDA Rural Development. You'll hear next about the congressionally directed spending or community project funding, community funding project. I always get those mixed up. And so we're aware of those programs. And if you come into us and you have a certain type of project, and it makes sense to go to one of those other programs, we're going to direct you to those other programs. And often, depending on the size of your project, it may be a combination of funds where you get some grants through DOLA, some grants through us, maybe some loan through us. And it's a combination of dollars that end up putting your project together is real common these days. So with that, I'd like to thank you for having me here and also answer any questions.
Good morning. Thank you for the presentation. My name is Kevin Brown. I'm with Cherokee Metro District on the east side of Colorado Springs. And I had a question regarding the definition of disadvantaged communities.
Sure.
It seems like that definition has shifted a lot recently. And in our most recent attempts to get grants, we've gotten different answers from different people about whether or not we're a disadvantaged community. Is there like an exhaustive list or a definition that states that we are or not a disadvantaged community, or is it determined every time we apply for a grant or loan?
So good question. And the answer is for us, we have our own definition of a disadvantaged community. We're worked with the Department of Public Health, Department of Local Affairs to come up with our definition. I can't tell you unless you gave me some additional information, whether you were a disadvantaged community or not. There's 5 criteria, and we look to try to qualify folks. So it's focused primarily on your median household income, median house value, but then we also look at your debt levels, other areas to try to qualify you for the funds. The best I can tell you is if you reach out to us, we can tell you if you are. We also have a map on DOLA's website. I don't have it here, but I can provide that as well, who can pretty much tell you based on the map whether you're going to qualify as a disadvantaged community. For us, that definition hasn't changed in a while. It's been the same probably for almost 10 years. But I do understand because every program there's no state definition of what a disadvantaged community is. So everybody has a little bit different definition, but thanks for the question. One other thing I wanted to mention on the wastewater side that I forgot to in terms of eligibility, which is important, we also fund stormwater projects and non-point source projects under the wastewater side. So if you're thinking, leaves us out, you have a big stormwater project, we have that available as well. One of the projects we did on the non-point source is here at Pikes Peak Highway. We actually paved sections of Pikes Peak Highway and put some berm work in so that the sediment, debris, oil that was leaking off into Fountain Creek no longer does so. And so that's an example of a non-point source project we've done in the area that you can do through these grants and through the SRF programs.
Son? Hi. 2 questions. When does the eligibility survey come out? And second, similar to that, if you have a non-point source project, how would that get on the eligibility survey?
The eligibility survey generally comes out in June. It's open for 3 to 4 months. You really have to have it in by the end of August, early September. But when the surveys go out in early June, early to mid-June every year, it'll tell you what your deadline is. It's an online portal through the state health department called CEOS, Colorado Environmental Online System. And there are categories in there. And one of the categories is non-point source. So you can pick that category, define your project, and that'll put you on the list. And you don't have to be real specific in terms of the information you provide on the survey. It's a short survey. It's a couple of pages. It's a broad definition. You don't get held in terms of the dollar amount. So if your project changes, cost went up, it's fine. As long as the project is listed on there, you're going to be okay. And non-point source, check that box and fill out what your project is. What I would suggest is that you put anything and everything that you have coming up over the next 5, 10, potentially even 20 years on the list. There's no harm of being on the list. If you're not on the list, you don't get the funding. If you're on the list, you're eligible to apply for it, but it doesn't require you to do anything except for fill out that survey to get on the list. So thanks for the question. No, So we ask you to look at it and make sure it's correct. But once you're on the survey, you're on the survey. If you have completed the survey or completed the project, and we know the project will come off the list if it's done, completely done, construction and everything. But we do ask you to look at it, make sure your project's still the same or add additional projects. But you shouldn't come off unless your project's maybe been on for 10 or 15 years and you haven't responded in that amount of time. It could come off, but generally once you're on the list, you're on the list. Thanks for the question.
And then Keith, we did have a question online from Mark. So if your question, you should be able to unmute.
Yes, thank you. This is Mark Harder from Teller County. I'm on the Florissant Fire Board of Directors. I just had a question on one of your earlier slides. You had mentioned the FY25 disaster supplemental notice for $1.5 billion for economic recovery for El Paso and Teller counties. Is that still open or is that closed now?
Yeah, I think that question was actually for Trent, not for me.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Trent's here. I think he can answer the question.
The disaster supplemental you're referencing, so it is still technically open, but I've been advising communities that if they are not able to get an application in by 1 June, the chances of there being funding available are going to decrease substantially. So it's still open though. So please contact me and let's talk.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me here. As a water guy, I hope you're enjoying the cooler weather and the rain. I'm really worried about this summer, so hope you're enjoying it as well. Thank you.